Peter is a journalist specializing in adventure travel writing. On this assignment, he traveled to the Northern Territory of Australia, a region famous for its wildlife, especially the enormous crocodiles that inhabit its rivers. He came here to join a local tour to gather material for his article. The tour was led by Kate, a local guide who organizes boat trips for tourists to experience the wilderness and see crocodiles in their natural habitat. She always brought along her dog, Kevin. As the tourists showed their tickets and boarded the boat, they settled into their seats. The engine roared to life and the journey began. Among the passengers was Peter, blending in with other travelers who were busy taking photos of the breathtaking landscape. From a distance, they even spotted tourists on another boat feeding crocodiles with bait tied to a fishing pole. The sight thrilled everyone, especially when a massive crocodile leapt high out of the water, using its powerful tail to propel its entire body upward. As the boat entered crocodile territory, Kate began explaining the animal's behavior, hunting techniques, and unique skills. She described the saltwater crocodile as the most dangerous of its kind. They can glide underwater at 20 miles per hour without leaving the slightest ripple on the surface, and then launch a terrifyingly fast attack. Saltwater crocodiles are also intelligent predators, capable of observing and remembering their prey's habits. They can grow from 6 to nearly 8 meters long and weigh up to 2 tons. Kate even mentioned the local legends of giant crocodiles that once roamed the area. Later, Peter sat down to chat with Kate. He introduced himself as a travel journalist from Chicago. Kate shared that she was born and raised here and had never left the region. As the boat traveled deeper into the forest, 2 young men appeared on a motorized canoe, seemingly locals from Kate's town. They blocked the path of the tour boat and teased the tourists, which annoyed many passengers. Kate firmly told them she was working and asked them not to disturb the visitors, but the young man in the red cap, named Neil, refused to move. Kate didn't back down. She suddenly pushed the throttle forward, startling Neil's companion, who lost control of the canoe and tumbled straight into the river. The passengers erupted in laughter at the sight. A while later, the sightseeing trip came to an end, and Kate turned the boat around to return so everyone could catch their bus back to town. But suddenly, a man filming the scenery spotted a distress flare in the distance. Moments later, a second flare lit up the sky. Concern spread through the passengers. Kate quickly radioed the base to report the incident and said she would head upriver to check if someone was in danger. Some tourists protested, worried about missing their schedule, but in the end, everyone agreed that saving lives was more important. As they traveled deeper into the river's headwaters, Kate grew tense. Peter asked if she was all right. She admitted this was sacred land and she had never dared venture here before. One tourist noticed an ancient cave drawing depicting a giant crocodile attacking humans, which stirred unease in the group. Eventually, they reached a swamp where the river was shallow, but they found no trace of survivors. Peter suggested turning back since nightfall was approaching. Suddenly, Kate spotted something floating on the water, a capsized dinghy. It was surely where the distress flares had come from. Just then, something massive surged from below and rammed the tour boat, tearing a hole in its hull. Water poured in rapidly. Kate steered straight toward a small nearby island, running the boat ashore so everyone could scramble onto land. Kate checked her radio, but it had been soaked and was useless. The tourists grew panicked, but she tried to reassure them. If they didn't return, the tour company would eventually send out a search team, though it might take hours. One man pointed out that the tide was rising and the entire island would soon be submerged. He suggested that swimming across the river to reach the far bank would only take a few hours on foot to get back. But Kate strongly objected, warning that the water was far too dangerous. Frustrated, the man attempted to climb down into the river anyway. At that moment, another passenger in a blue shirt tackled him to stop him. In the commotion, he stood too close to the edge. Suddenly, the radio crackled with a brief signal and everyone turned their attention to it. When they looked back, the man in the blue shirt was gone. Only a massive crocodile's tail was seen vanishing into the water. His wife screamed in despair, calling out his name. Kate immediately warned everyone to stay away from the shoreline. They checked their phones and the damaged radio, but none had a signal. Peter returned to the boat to look for flashlights, but found none, and worse, the box of signal flares had drifted away. Just then, the motorized canoe of the two young men appeared. Everyone waved frantically for help. The pair, however, only laughed cruelly at the stranded group, circling them mockingly. But before they could enjoy their taunts for long, something surged up from the depths and slammed into their canoe. The boat was thrown into the air, the two men were hurled into the river, and the canoe vanished beneath the surface. Neil was lucky enough to swim ashore, but his friend vanished beneath the river, surely dragged away by the crocodile. Darkness began to fall, and the tide was rising fast. Peter turned on the boat's lights for extra illumination, while the group built a small fire to keep warm. Neil then proposed a daring plan. He suggested swimming quietly to the opposite bank with a rope tied around his waist. Once there, he would fasten the rope high to a tree branch, creating a line stretched above the water so everyone could slide across one by one. Some hesitated, but both Neil and Kate understood crocodile behavior. These predators were fiercely territorial. The giant beast was agitated by their intrusion. If they didn't leave soon, the rising tide would submerge the tiny island, leaving them as nothing more than its next meal. The plan went forward. Neil tied the rope around himself and slipped into the water, swimming slowly and silently. The group held their breath, watching anxiously, some even peering through camera lenses to detect any disturbance on the surface. Minutes passed in agonizing silence before Neil finally reached the far bank unharmed. He secured the rope tightly around a sturdy branch. The widow of the man taken earlier insisted on going first. She couldn't bear to stay another moment. Strapping on a life vest, she climbed up and began inching her way across the rope. At first, everything went smoothly, but halfway across, fear overwhelmed her. She froze in place, clutching the rope, paralyzed. An older man, desperate, urged his daughter to go out and push the woman along. When Peter tried to stop him, the man grew angry, shoved him aside, and foolishly climbed onto the rope himself, ignoring warnings about the weight. Now 3 people clung to the same line. Through a camera lens, someone spotted ripples on the water. The father and daughter were nearing the woman who remained motionless in fear. On the opposite bank, Neil bent down to retrieve his dropped flashlight. In that instant, the crocodile erupted from the river and attacked him, dragging him under. Kate screamed in panic, shouting at the 3 stranded figures to move quickly. Startled, one of them slipped, dangling dangerously close to the water. Then came disaster. The tree anchoring the rope on the far bank gave way under the weight, toppling into the river. All 3 plunged into the water. By sheer luck, they managed to scramble to shore, spared only because the crocodile was busy with Neil. Shaken, the older man apologized for his reckless actions. But fate struck back swiftly. The monstrous crocodile lunged from the depths, clamped its jaws around him, and hurled him violently before dragging him away. He disappeared beneath the river in its grip. The survivors stood in shock, paralyzed by the horror of what they had witnessed. Even Peter admitted to himself that the sight of a crocodile the size of their boat made him want to collapse from terror. Kate was racked with guilt, blaming herself for leading them into this deadly territory. Peter held her close, assuring her it wasn't her fault. Kate asked him to search the boat for the first aid kit, but it had drifted away. Instead, Peter spotted the anchor and devised a desperate plan: to use it as a hook to snare the crocodile, keeping it trapped long enough for everyone else to swim to safety. The problem: they needed live bait. Instinctively, eyes turned toward Kevin, Kate's loyal dog. Kate refused outright. But then someone noticed Neil's 2 wild ducks still caged nearby. Relieved, they rigged the bait, tying one to the hook with a float so it would thrash on the surface. Still, the trap required someone to yank the rope, making the bait move and lure the predator. Peter volunteered, meaning he would have to cross last. The others donned life vests and prepared. Kate handed Kevin to Peter for safekeeping before helping the others get ready. Suddenly, the rope jerked taut. The bait was gone. The crocodile had taken it. Kate shouted for everyone to get into the water, swim as fast as possible. The beast thrashed violently, dragging even the heavy stone anchoring the rope. As the others swam frantically toward the far bank, Kate waited until they were nearly safe before leaping in herself. Peter prepared to follow, but the rope snapped loose, and the hook floated to the surface. The crocodile was free. By then, all the passengers had reached shore. Only Kate remained in the water. Peter screamed for her to hurry. She shouted back for everyone to run upstream, promising she and Peter would follow. But before she could escape, the giant crocodile surged from behind, clamping its jaws around her and rolling savagely in the water. Peter dove in, but by the time he reached the spot, Kate was gone. Only her flashlight floated up from the depths. Desperate, he grabbed it, calling her name again and again, but there was no answer, no trace of her. At last, with Kevin paddling beside him, Peter swam across to join the others. Exhausted and broken, he stared back at the river, where the dark water swallowed every sound, leaving only the cold, lifeless beam of Kate's flashlight in his hands. When Peter entered the forest, he realized the other tourists had already disappeared. Terrified, they must have fled as fast as they could to escape the territory of the demon crocodile. Alone with only Kevin, Peter stumbled through the dark until dawn was near. Suddenly, Kevin barked and darted off. Peter chased after him, calling out, but the dog vanished. Following the distant barks, he discovered a massive hollow tree, an ancient giant. Kevin seemed to be inside. No matter how Peter called, the dog wouldn't come out. As he moved closer, his footing slipped, and he tumbled into a water-filled pit. Regaining his senses, Peter froze in horror. A body floated nearby. Turning it over, he recognized Neil. His corpse had been savagely torn apart. Kevin's bark echoed deeper inside. Peter followed into a narrow cave, flashlight in hand. There, he found the dog sitting still beside something, or rather, someone. It was Kate. Kevin had caught her scent and led Peter here. Checking her pulse, Peter was relieved. She was alive, but badly injured with vicious crocodile bites. Suddenly, Kevin dashed outside, barking furiously. A yelp cut short his cries. Then silence fell. A massive shadow crept into the cave. Peter's blood ran cold. He quickly lifted Kate, placing her on a high ledge among the roots, then climbed up beside her to hide. The giant crocodile slithered in, easily over 7 meters long. In its jaws hung Kevin, whom it chewed and swallowed whole. Bloated and sluggish after feeding, the beast dragged its heavy bulk deeper into the cave, then collapsed like a grotesque hog and began to sleep. Peter waited, heart pounding. When the monster's breathing grew slow, he carefully carried Kate down and waded silently toward the exit. Every few steps, he turned back to check. Still, the reptile lay motionless. At last, they reached the riverbank. Peter placed Kate first, then began to climb after her. But when he turned, terror struck. The crocodile was gone. From beneath the water, it lunged upward, jaws snapping. Peter barely dodged, dragging Kate into a root-covered hollow. Spotting a long tree limb nearby, he made a desperate dash for it, only to be knocked flat by the beast's tail. He scrambled up, seized the log, and jabbed it toward the crocodile. It bit clean through the wood, leaving a sharpened point. The monster thrashed, tossing Peter aside. He darted into a narrow crevice where the reptile could only squeeze in sideways. Its massive jaws snapped again and again. Peter shoved desperately to keep it back, but its teeth clamped down on his arm, shearing off several fingers. He screamed in agony. Grabbing a jagged bone from the ground, he drove it into the creature's eye. Roaring in pain, it recoiled and pulled away. But Kate stirred and coughed weakly. The crocodile heard and turned toward her. Luckily, thick roots blocked its path. To distract it, Peter hurled a rock. The beast immediately swung back to him. Peter crawled toward the broken log from before, propping himself against a boulder. He braced the sharpened point outward. The crocodile slowly advanced, then suddenly lunged at full speed, jaws gaping. Its fangs slammed shut around the rock, but the sharpened log drove straight through its skull. The monster writhed violently, then fell still, lifeless. Peter, trapped between its teeth, struggled free and staggered back, gasping. At last, the nightmare was over. Against all odds, he had slain the giant beast. Peter carried Kate out of the cave. By then, the sun had risen high. Exhausted, he trudged through the swamp until they stumbled upon the rescue team. The other tourists were there, shaken but alive. Relief washed over him. The medics bandaged Peter's wounds, while Kate was placed on a stretcher and prepared for helicopter evacuation. She was awake now, weak but conscious. Turning to him, she whispered her gratitude for saving her life. The end.